Welcome to Sober Sunrise, a podcast bringing you AA speaker meetings with stories of experience, strength, and hope from around the world. We bring you several new speakers weekly, so be sure to subscribe. Whether you join us in the morning or at night, there's nothing better than a sober sunrise. We hope that you enjoy today's speaker.
My name's Mike, and I'm an alcoholic. My dry date is September 7th, 1985, and my home group's the Dignitary Sympathy Group in Indianapolis, Indiana. We meet on Tuesday nights, and be pleased to see any of you coming through town. We used to be, since our inception, for about 18 years, we were a men's group, and through some exploration and group inventory over a period of 4 or 5 years, we're now open to all who suffer from alcoholism. And it's the girls now get to come up in the treehouse and play with the guys. And we found an amazing thing that we didn't dilute the quality of our meeting at all. As a matter of fact, we may have raised it a couple of notches. That was a gift, incidentally, from a friend of mine, and I'm sure yours too, Don, from Aurora. Don said, if you don't have any girls there, what you've got is you've got guys that don't know anything about women teaching other guys about women. And what I thought I would do with your permission here to start is that now that I've introduced myself, we'll have a little few minutes of meditation, and then do a prayer, and we'll get started getting to know each other and forming the group here. So if you want to get comfortable and kind of relax into the stillness a little bit, but just find it that for some of the people that haven't had a lot of experience with meditation, that we'll start with a little piece of music here that kind of helps us maybe relax into that stillness. And this piece is a piece called The Prayer of St. Gregory, and that's just kind of a favorite of mine. So, with your permission, we'll start. I'm just kind of the sideshow here this weekend. I'm here so you'll get together. And I suspect, looking at this setting, that you'd be delighted to come here anyway, because it's such a beautiful place. But we're going to hopefully spend a weekend getting to know ourselves and each other better, and by doing that, we'll end up knowing God better. And I think it's a wonderful way for us to spend a weekend. I wrote a little prayer for this weekend, and I'd like to share that with you. Loving Spirit, we ask your blessing for all who have gathered in this sacred place of retreat. Let us be conscious of your presence as we form this group. We ask that you remove our fear, especially of each other, and bring our hearts and minds into unity. Unity with each other, that we may learn to grow in harmony. Unity with you, that we may do your will always. Loving Father, please guide our dialogue with each other, that your will for us may be revealed. Open our minds and hearts, that we can set aside our old ideas. Let us be constantly reminded that you desire our happiness above all things. Amen. In order that I can begin to get to know you better, there are a few old friends here that I'm so delighted to see again, but many of you I haven't met before. So what I'm going to suggest is we'll start around the room, and you can tell us who you are, what you are, maybe your dry date if you like, and if you have any special intention or anything special that you're looking for this weekend. Now you can look around and do a head count here and see if we all take a couple minutes to do that that will burn the entire night. I learned long ago that it's absolutely useless for me to try and control a crowd of alcoholics, but I'll make a suggestion that we may want to be somewhat brief about that. So with that in mind, why don't we start over here with Turk? Well, welcome, and I especially could we have a show of hands of the people that are at their very first retreat ever? Look around, wow! I want to honor and congratulate you. What it was like when I did my first retreat, I was about 6 months sober, and like many of you, it was at the strong suggestion of a sponsor, and I was so afraid of what I imagined that retreat was going to be because it was in a monastery, and I'd been, avoiding God for a long time because I was sure that He was armed and dangerous and looking for me, and they found me at the beginning, and just as that retreat was about ready to begin, I was sure that they were going to confiscate. I was a 3-pack-a-day smoker then, and carried my own thermos of coffee to make sure I had enough. And they found me by the front gate of that retreat, smoking cigarettes 2 at a time, and afraid to go in. And one of the old timers came and took me by the hand and walked me into that place, and that was one of the doors that opened to the wonderful life I have today. So I honor people that have the courage to come for the first time, and I want to also honor the people that the old timers that have got here that continue to come back and have the humility to continue to want to grow and learn and expand in their relationship with God and give back to this fellowship. I think one of the saddest things I see from time to time and going around different places is the people that have essentially packed it up and said, well, I've done my share. It's now somebody else's turn. And, those people over time I don't seem to do very well. And it's a very sad thing to see. And it's also a glorious thing to see some of them waking up and come back and bloom again too in this fellowship. So glad to see everybody here. I suspect we've got some smokers in here. Am I right? Okay. I'm going to talk for just a little bit longer, and then we'll take a break, and so the smokers don't go crazy, and we can visit the restroom and so forth. What do you like for breaks? 10 minutes, 15 minutes? What's the group conscience on that? 3 years. 3 years? Okay. 10 minutes? Okay. All right. Well, when we take a break, we can make it a 10-minute break. We'll see what it really is. That's when you gather again. That's the real group conscience, But I'll be in the chair 10 minutes after we take that break. I had my first drink when I was 12 years old, and it was magic for me. What happened is described on page 27 of our basic text here, and in that paragraph there, Carl Jung is talking to a guy by the name of Roland Hazard, which I think is just a marvelous name for an alcoholic, but Roland, I was kind of more like a rolling hazard. Roland was a rich alcoholic of the most dangerous kind, and his family was able to send him to Europe to be with the finest psychiatrist available at the time, who's at that time was Carl Jung. He was probably neck and neck with Freud at that point in time, and they spent time together. He spent in 6 months, more or less, living at Carl Jung's compound and letting Carl work on him. And at that end of that time, Roland was sure that his drink problem had been solved, and so he was going to go back to the States. Now, in those days, you didn't take the Concorde or a 747 back to the States. You went to one of the ports and you embarked on a liner and came back. And he was sitting around in Paris waiting to catch his ship when somebody asked him the wrong question. And the wrong question for him was, "Would you like some wine with your meal, sir?" And before he knew what had happened, 6 months of not drinking and 6 months of everything that Carl Jung was able to teach him just went up in smoke. He had a strange mental blank spot. And so he made his way back to Carl, and, I don't know if I suspect being an alcoholic, he wanted his money back, but I don't, that part isn't recorded. But he essentially asked Carl, "What in the heck happened to me? What in the world? I was sure that, what you taught me and everything else, I was never going to drink again." And Carl essentially says, "Well, you're doomed. You apparently are a certain type of alcoholic, and no treatment we have, as far as we know, is able to change that." And not liking that diagnosis, like any of us, Roland says, "Well, isn't there anything that can be done?" And he says, "Well, yes, once in a while, here and there, men have had spiritual awakenings or spiritual experiences, great emotional rearrangements and displacements, and they seem to not drink again." And the way he described a spiritual awakening was, he said, ideas and emotions that were the guiding force in the lives of these men are suddenly cast to one side, and a new set of conceptions take hold. Now, that's exactly what happened to the 12-year-old. I was a 12-year-old that needed a drink. And when I took that drink, ideas, emotions, and everything that had governed my life up to that point in time got set off to the side. I was a little Mr. Goody Two-Shoes. I was a kid you probably wanted to slap. I worked in the principal's office. I was a little honor student. I was the teacher's pet. I was, a little Boy Scout, all that kind of stuff. And I didn't do those things, by the way, because I was really, truly a good kid. I did those things to get approval, because what I needed was approval. I needed praise, particularly from adults, and approval. And I had that spiritual awakening, and I didn't need any of that crap anymore. I was, within a couple of weeks, all of that stuff was going on. Now, I didn't become a continuous drinker at 12 years old, but what I did is I found something that worked. And it wasn't until much later, when a man was helping me in this program, that he pointed that out to me and showed me what had happened to me. Who I'd always been was somebody who I'd been a child who desperately needed a spiritual awakening, and I didn't know how to have one on my own. And so I stole one out of a bottle. And because it was stolen, I couldn't keep it. It was synthetic. But the rest of my life was a search for that awakening. Now, I had no clue that was, because if you'd asked me when I came around here, I always kind of chuckle when I hear people talking about searching for their spirituality. My understanding is we all have spirituality. Spirituality is like health. You can have good health or bad health, but we all have health. And I'm innately a spiritual being. What I didn't have was I didn't have any consciousness of that. I didn't have an awareness of that was useful to me. And so I lived in a state of fear. And everything I did in my life was, one way or another, taken in that direction to have that awakening. I didn't have any consequences from drinking when I was 12 years old. And I won't take you through a long drunk-a-log here. Some of it will probably come up over the weekend as we talk about various things. But to give you a couple snapshots of what life was like, I'm maybe 15 years old, and I grew up in a little town, a college town, maybe a great deal like Eugene here. I was a Big Ten college town in Iowa City, Iowa is where I grew up. And in the 50s when I grew up, it was kind of an Ozzie and Harriet kind of place. People left their keys in the car, didn't lock their houses usually. Everybody kind of knew the neighbors. On Friday nights, we had this kind of big loop or block we lived on, and all the fathers had put a bunch of grills together in the center of the backyards there, and we'd have fish fries on the weekends, and every family'd bring something different, and so I was used to pitch-ins at an early age, and so that was the kind of background I had. I need to tell you, by the way, partially as a matter of amends, I come from, I used to say a normal family. I'll tell you it's a functional family. I don't know, I'm not sure what a normal family would be. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. I just buried my mother 2 weeks ago today. And my I was so desperate to belong when I got here that I invented an entire dysfunctional family because I thought I needed a dysfunctional family in order to fit in. And by saying that, I'm not dissing anybody who had that experience, because I've got dear friends that had horrific childhoods, but I lied about mine. You know. Now, the family wasn't perfect, but what the family did is when there was a problem, the family faced the problem. And frequently, I was the problem. So, I'm back to telling the truth about those family members now. But like I said, I'm the oldest. It's maybe a Wednesday night during the school week, and I'm coming in about midnight, 1 o'clock, and the door's not locked, but I'm a little clumsy getting in because I've been out drinking some. And I make some noise, and my mother wakes up, and she says, "Mike, is that you?" And I swear at her, "Yeah, F off, leave me alone." You know, that was a serious mistake. My father got through college on a scholarship playing tackle for Drake University. If that gives you the picture here, and I'm 15 and I'm drunk, and so my dad would get up, and my dad, even though he was a very big man, was a very gentle man, would never lay a hand on me, but he would not allow me to abuse my mother. So he'd say, "Son, you're not going to talk to your mother like that." Now, being drunk, I would do the next insane thing. I'd wind up and take a swing at him. Now, thank God, I'm big enough that I can cause him a little trouble, but he'd have mercy on me, and instead of just knocking my head off, he'd restrain me. But I'm a big enough kid that I can cause him a little trouble. So we're wrestling around on the kitchen floor, and I'm maybe trying to slam his head in a cupboard, and now the other 3 younger kids are up, and they're upset and they're crying because they're afraid that their daddy and their big brother are going to hurt each other. That doesn't sound like any description of social drinking that I'm familiar with. See, I got here with the illusion that I'd had a normal drinking life up to a given point, and that at somewhere it just went off the rails. You know, when I was... But I get to see what the truth of my experience is. Taking a year or two down the road, I'm 16, 17, and I'm driving now. That's why I put it in that time frame. And we're sitting around the kitchen table, and in the middle of the table is my sister's hope chest, one of these little wooden boxes the gals had in those days. And the reason it's there is she kept her babysitting money in that hope chest, and it's gone. And so we're having a family meeting to figure out what happened to Carol's money. And I did, well, you're doing it too. They all seem to be looking at me. And I looked him right in the eye and, what in the hell are you looking at me that way for? I don't know what happened to her money. And of course I did. Her big brother took the money that she was saving for a special dress, and I went out and I bought a keg for my friends out at the lake that weekend and had a big party. so I could be the center of attention, the guy that brought the keg. And so here I am, I'm in this illusion that I'm a normal social drinker, but the truth is that almost out of the gate, I'm bringing violence into my home, and I'm stealing to support my habit. This is not the picture of normal drinking that I have. I need to talk a minute about what alcohol did for me. I was a frightened kid, like I said. Now, the way I understand it today is I didn't walk around saying I was frightened. What I walked around is I was a bully. I was a walk around. I was angry. I'd walk around. I'd get in your face, and all that stuff. And I didn't understand that was my way to control my fear, was to push back at the world. And the alcohol did something for me. It opened me up. It loosened me up. It gave me what a scared kid out of a little town in Iowa. I could go off and I could go to the army, go to Vietnam. That always puzzled me, by the way. I ended up the most highly decorated soldier of that period out of my little part of the country there, eastern Iowa, and had my picture in the paper. And the good part of that was that my folks got to see my name in the paper for something other than getting picked up on Saturday night. But I couldn't ever reconcile the fact that I had stuff signed by the Secretary of Defense and the President that said I was gallant in action and all this other stuff, and I couldn't reconcile that with the fear I felt. And so I even felt like a phony there. Part of me needed the recognition, and part of me despised myself for acknowledging it because I knew I was scared to death, And our friend Don helped me, walk me into that years ago. He said, I said, Don, how is it that I can be so frightened and I'm doing things like running at machine guns and doing this stuff, And he said, he says, you just did that out of fear. He said, you were more afraid of being a coward than you were the consequences of your behavior. And so I get to see that again, that I was a guy who needed to drink more than ever. And when I came back from that, because of my experience, that I could get a break. I could walk in, and if I did something, or if I got too drunk, or if I bent a car or something, I could get the local police chief to say, well, I guess if I'd been where you'd been and did what you did, I might need to let off a little steam too. And so I'm out trading on that stuff now and living a dishonest life. Now that also, the alcohol also was fuel that got the little scared kid out of Iowa to go into business and end up in Chicago and New York and Atlanta and some places that I guarantee I would have never had the guts to go if I couldn't have a drink in my hand. If I had a drink in my hand, I could say yes to life. And for a period of time, it didn't seem to go way off the rails. If to the extent that there were bad instances, they were minor. I wasn't paying a price for them. And that slowed down. We've been here a little over an hour. Why don't we take that 10-minute break now and come on back, and we'll keep going here. I don't know that I've ever seen a group regather this fast without a cowbell or something going on here. The Spirit must be among us here tonight. Something. Well, I told you a little bit about how my drinking started out. I don't want to. We all know what goes on. Let me tell you about the end of my drinking here, and just kind of cut to the chase. The end of my drinking. I used to say that I was living with a woman. The truth was I was living off a woman. And I'd become what I had not been raised to be. I was using, and I was pretty much unemployable at this time. The career's gone, the houses are gone, the cars are, well, I've got a shelled out 280 Nissan Z that when I used to go to the club, people used to kid me about that I'd apparently taken that car in a daylight raid over Germany because there were great big holes through all the body panels, like I'd been hit by flak. And my days started that I'd get up whenever I could get up, and I'd go out to the kitchen in this apartment, and I'd make a drink, and I'd take the drink into the bathroom, and I'd sit on the edge of the tub and try and get that first drink to stay down, because I wasn't going to be able to do anything until the first drink stayed down. And some days it did, and some days it didn't. And if I was going to write a bad check that day, I filled out as much of it as I could right there at home, because it was humiliating to stand in a store in front of a clerk and have my hands just dance across the check. I was a functional alcoholic because she had a job, and we were living with the fiction that, one day I was going to be employable again and things were going to change and I was going to be back in the big time. But I knew in my heart that wasn't going to happen. I didn't find out until later that I was on an allowance then. And the way my allowance worked was that when she came home from work, she decided how much money she was going to let me steal from her that night. And that's how much money she'd leave in her purse. And she put the rest of it under the tire cover in the trunk of the car before she came in the apartment, And the only way you can do that is one day at a time. So I knew about one day at a time living before I got here. I can't tell you what happened, but one morning I found myself crawling around the floor of that bathroom, and I decided to try one more time to get sober. Now, I'd been coming to various places, including AA, for the past 6 years, and my best friends and drinking buddies were either the ones that were still alive and had survived the car wrecks and the overdoses and all of that stuff. They'd gotten sober. One of those guys is going to be celebrating 30 years this July 4th. But I'd gone to the same treatment centers and tried to see the same people, and I went there and I was sincere, but it just didn't seem to work for me. I mean, I was the kind of guy that I walked around treatment with a legal pad taking notes. As a matter of fact, that may have been part of the problem there. One of the counselors that had my number grabbed me and he says, Mike, this may come as a shock to you, but you're not a member of the staff. You're not here as a consultant, because I was taking the need to do this, but I could parrot all this stuff, and I thought I'd had the best that recovery had to offer here. But of course I was wrong. And I can't tell you, because I was completely hopeless, because I thought that I'd tried everything and nothing worked, and I don't know why I tried to get sober one more time, but some wind of grace blew through that bathroom, and I told that gal that I needed to try and get sober again. I'm living in Indianapolis, but I'm confused. There's VA centers there, and there's VA centers Illinois and everything else, but the only VA center I could remember was in the middle of my old home state, Iowa, a place called Knoxville. So I told her I was going to try and get sober again, and she filled up my tank with gas, gave me $20 and a pint of light Bacardi rum, and I set off to find sobriety. And This was a Labor Day weekend, and our Labor Day weekends in the Midwest are sometimes very, very hot. And this was 100 plus the heat index. I don't know what it was, but it was one of the roasting times. And of course I'm a drunk. I'm in bad shape, and the air conditioning doesn't work in that car. But I got in the car. And the rum was a mercy because she knew I didn't like rum all that much, so I'd probably sip it slow. But I was more dangerous driving completely sober in those days than I was if I had a little something in me. I just made quick moves across 3 and 4 lanes with just a twitch. And I got in that car in that heat, and I went as far as I could go, and as far as I could go, left me about 100 miles short of that treatment facility. Now, the other places I went to, I'd had fine insurance, and I'd had some money to spend and everything else, and I'm out of resources now. I'm down to what the VA will do for me. And I can't make the last 100 miles, and where I pull off Interstate 80 is right near my old hometown in Iowa City. And my dad's dead by this time. But my mother and two of my brothers still live there. But I know today that they would have welcomed me and helped me. But maybe one of the things that broke with me was that I just lost the ability to go hurt them one more time. Because some of the stuff I did that was really harmful wasn't so much the stuff the war stories that I told. What I did is I took the people that loved me the most, and time after time I gave them hope, and then I crushed their hearts. This time my son's getting better. This time our brother's going to make it. Let's all get together and we'll help Mike. We'll support Mike. We'll do whatever we need to for Mike, and I knew bottom for me was knowing that no matter how much I loved you, and no matter how much I wanted to not drink, if you're near me and you love me, you're going to get hurt. And so the only thing I can do is stay away from you. So where I ended up was on the front porch of the parents of my best friend and drinking buddy from high school. Jerry had gotten sober and moved away some years ago, but his dad, Buck, and his wife, Nettie, were still living there in the house, and Buck was one of my old drinking buddies. Even though he'd been my friend's dad, Buck was an old paratrooper from World War II. And when I was in the service, toward the end of every month, I'd get a letter from Buck with a $20 bill in it. And Buck would say, the note would go something like this: I know damn well you're broke by now, and you probably need a drink. Go have a good time. In 10-cent can PX beer, I could, with $20, I could get going on that stuff. And Buck and his wife had done a terrible thing. About 8 years before that, they'd gotten sober, and they and I lost my drinking buddy, and I didn't like it. And they were doing crazy stuff like talking about God and praying and even going to church. And I got to tell you that I didn't accept that gracefully. I badmouthed them to their face and to anybody who'd listen. And I think church puppies was probably the nicest thing I called them along the way. How can an old man, guy from the parachute regiment, turn into a, and here I am knocking on the front door, and I'm dying, and I can't make the last 100 miles. And they came to the door, and they looked at me and then looked at each other, and they just both put their arms around me and just drew me into that living room. And without saying another word, they both had their arms around me. They said a prayer for me to get better. And I stood still for the prayer. And then Buck, being a practical man, gave me a drink and put me to bed. And I got up the next day, and they took me the last 100 miles. And Buck and I had a chance. He left us a couple years ago, but we had a lot of years to talk about what happened there. And we about all we remembered about that trip that I was sitting in the back seat, and I'd reach up over that seat, and I'd grab Buck by the shoulder, and I'd be crying. I'd say, Buck, please tell me, how do I get this God stuff? How do I get this God stuff? Because it seemed to work for everybody else, and I didn't doubt it. It was such a mystery, but I didn't believe it could happen for me. I knew it was real because I saw it happen to other people. But I didn't believe that I could have a personal relationship with a power greater than myself that was going to do anything. And if Buck answered, I don't remember what it was, and neither could he. And so when I got to that treatment center, a couple of good things happened to me. The first thing was that, God knew, I guess, what I needed. And what I needed right then is they did a medical evaluation, and they said, you're too sick to go to treatment. We got to put you in the intensive care unit here in the hospital for a little while. And then if you make it, we'll see about treatment. And one of my spiritual awakenings is when this orderly came around, and one of the great things about intensive care is they leave you alone. There isn't anybody else there. They come in and check vitals and do stuff like that. But there was nobody to lie to. If you'd put me in, I'm institutionalizing well now. If you put me in a treatment unit, right then, I know what to do. I know how to get along. I'm treatment slick. I'm going to be working my will inside that treatment center in a matter of days if I have my deal. But I didn't. I'm in intensive care. There's nobody to lie to, and this orderly. And he looked like he was carrying a scythe over his shoulder, like death itself comes in. And he just is, I need this form, I need you to sign this form and tell me where you want your belongings sent for the next of kin. You mean you're not going to talk about my treatment program and what? And I woke up a little bit. And once they unhooked me from everything there and got me in a regular, I did a couple things that I'd never done before. I made two decisions, I believe, that saved my life. One was that I was going to, even though I didn't know how, I was going to start trying to have this relationship with God. And I began praying, even though I didn't know much. I mean, I'm starting out from now I lay me down to sleep place on this. Jesus loves me, all this kind of stuff. And the other thing was that if I get out of here, I'm going to become a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Up until then, I'd been to plenty of meetings, but I was just a guy that was taking up space and keeping the chair warm. I wasn't really a member, an active member of this program. A miracle happened in there, by the way. A lot of them, but found out that they hadn't changed anything in this treatment program from all the other ones I came. The 12 steps were still the same, and the book was still blue, and all that kind of stuff. But I'd gotten changed. And after I'd been there maybe 3 weeks, they had an election for officers in the patients running the treatment center, the treatment unit there, class, and I was nominated to be class president. And they walked out of the room, and they had a vote, and I came back in, and thank God I lost. You know, if I'd won, you probably have a different guy sitting here tonight, because my ego would have reinflated to the standpoint that it could have taken me out of here. But even I couldn't miss the message that I'd just come in second place in the nut house. I told you I got a functional family. My baby brother would ride his motorcycle 100 miles each way to come have lunch with me when he could. That's a functional family. They all loved me and supported me. When I couldn't get back to Indianapolis right away when I got out of that place, and so where I got to go, like all good alcoholics, I got to go back home to Mommy. And here I am in my old bedroom. Well, my youngest brother doesn't have our disease, but he was starting a business that he's still in today as a distributor of fine wines. And so my old bedroom was his first warehouse. So my first night out of treatment, here's my old bed, and surrounded on three sides to the ceiling are cases of wine. I share this with all the folks that think you need special conditions. I was surrendered. I was done. It could have been anything in those. There was those boxes didn't have anything that I wanted in them anymore. So anyway, I got back to Indianapolis, and I eventually, and I proceeded on my course to become a junior guru in AA. And I went to 11 meetings a week for several years. I still go to 5 meetings a week. I enjoy meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I'm somebody that will take any solution and turn it into a problem. So I'm... I essentially got active. I started a meeting. I did all kinds of things. Every service gig I could get my hands on. And what I did essentially over my first 4.5 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, call it 5, realized was exactly what I did years before when I'd gone to the University of Iowa. When I went to the University of Iowa, I went over to the field house and I registered for classes. And I went downtown and I went to the student bookstore and I bought all my books. I joined a fraternity, threw the books in the closet, and started partying. And if you ran into me on campus and asked me what I was doing, I said, I'm a pre-law student here at the University of Iowa. Well, that was technically true. But the fact was I almost never went to class. And that's when I never missed a meeting, I never missed a dance, I never missed a committee function, but I was almost completely unscarred by the recovery program, Alcoholics Anonymous here. And meetings do work. If you go to a meeting, you will feel better. But what was happening to me, it's like I'm like a guy with a bad wisdom tooth, and I go into the dentist, and he looks at the tooth, and he says, Mike, I think we're going to have to take that tooth out. Oh, no, don't do it. Give me some Novocaine. And I come back a little later, that tooth, my face is all puffed out. Oh, no, give me some Novocaine, And I will get some relief. I will feel better for time. But all the while, the condition is getting worse. I'm sitting here, I'm finally come to a point as I'm approaching my 5th anniversary in AA. It's an unimaginable period of sober time for me. I couldn't conceive after what I'd been through that it would be possible for me to stay sober even a year, let alone 5. And here I am. And I was more desperate, and I was more discouraged than I'd ever been in my life, because, you see, I didn't know what was going on, but here I was further from a drink than I ever expected to be, and I'm dying of untreated alcoholism. Right in the middle of 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 meetings a week, I'm dying of alcoholism. How can this be? Well, I haven't experienced the recovery program of Alcoholics Anonymous, is how that could be. And God's got a delicious sense of humor that I got my life saved by the guy I disliked most in Alcoholics Anonymous. The man I dislike most in Alcoholics Anonymous, a couple of guys here know him, is a man by the name of Gary B. Gary, well, Gary's 41 years sober now. The first time I saw Gary, I was a couple months sober, and he was 45 years old and getting a 21-year token. And all the girls in the meeting went, "Oh God, it's him! Isn't he gorgeous? He's so tall and slender, and oh, he looks so good." Yeah. And even my married girlfriend thought he was cute. And he's probably need to cover that now here. One of the things I'd managed to do around here, and because I'm a junior guru, is I managed to convince myself that this married girlfriend was God's will. I'm sponsoring her 16-year-old son, and I play euchre on the weekends with her husband, and he's a gun-toting federal agent. This got me fired by my second sponsor, who may have saved my life by firing me there. He grabbed me in the parking lot of the club one day, and he says, "Mike," he says, "I keep confronting you about your behavior with this gal," and he says, "and every time I do, you explain it to me in such a way I start to think that this is God's will, and I know that's crazy, and so I can't be around you anymore. You're fired." And I'm required to mention that because the fact is that I know now from experience, I didn't know it then, that I'm by far from the only person that has made that kind of mistake around here, and that you don't have to get drunk because you made that kind of mistake. My experience is I had to change my behavior, but just because I made a serious error in judgment like that, I don't have to get drunk. I don't have to throw it all away. So I saw Gary several times thereafter, and I generally avoided him as much as possible, and I would have avoided him on this occasion. It's not in existence anymore, but we used to have a Sunday morning meeting at one of the hotels. It was kind of on the north side, and it was white tablecloths and fine china and coffee. And if you can believe it, they even charged drunks $1 for a cup of coffee at this things, and had people pouring. And I had my little junior guru at the front of the table at the front of this deal, and I was sitting up there with my people, and I found out too late that Gary was going to be the speaker at this thing. Now, God will work with whatever I give him, and my ego is such that I believe that if I get up and walk out of this meeting, which is what I really wanted to do, that everybody would notice and wonder what was wrong with me. So I sat there, pinned down by my own ego, and I listened to the guy I disliked most in Alcoholics Anonymous, and he lied for well over an hour. I mean, he talked about being 20 years sober and selling his house and cashing in his retirement plan in order to make amends. And I knew that was a lie. And he told other lies too. And he happened to mention where his home group was, and his home group was way the other side of town from where I lived. It was 30 miles each way. And so my mind decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to track this guy down to his home group, get the goods on him, and prove he's a liar and a phony and expose him. So this is my motive, that I'm start driving to his home group. And of course, God's got a sense of humor, and Gary's the first one that greets me at the door. Hi, gosh, we, been hoping you'd show up down here one of these days. And I thought, well, they've heard about me. Well, I found out they had, but not for the reason I thought. There's the guy that's dating the federal agent's wife. Yeah. And then being a good experienced member of Alcoholics Anonymous, when that meeting was over, I thought, well, I didn't get I won't come back here again. And I'm walking out the door, and Gary says, hey, I'm supposed to chair next week, but, I have some business going on. I may not be able to be here. Could you fill in for me? Well, now they need me to chair their meeting for them, so I got to come back. And it started that way, so I kept coming back, and eventually I was invited to join a group of men that were going to take the book Alcoholics Anonymous and start at the title page and go through the book and read the black print on the white page and follow the instructions. And a few days before we were supposed to start that, my conscience started bothering me. And at that time, Gary had an office. We were both in an office park, and he was kind of in the building across the lake from me. And so I called Gary up. I said, you don't happen to be able to have lunch, do you? And he said, well, as a matter of fact, I had a cancellation. I can't have lunch. So, okay. I meet him for lunch, and I sit down, and I said, Gary, from everything I've heard you guys talk about, these workshops are extremely intimate settings and intimate experiences, and there's just a tremendous amount of honesty and sharing there. And I said, before I start with this with you, I said, you need to know I don't like you at all. And he laughed, and he said, well, I reckon we can deal with that, cowboy. And he went on to tell me that the guy he did his first fifth step with back in the 60s was a guy named Ernie. And that was the time of love and peace and everything else. And the young people back then, when they were in meetings, would greet each other with a peace symbol across the room. He says the only problem was Ernie was missing one finger when he waved at me. So I went through that, and I further from a drink than I ever expected to be. I finally had the experience, and I was touched through my own experience by the recovery program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the miracle almost happened. See, because I was almost, I wasn't going to drink again, folks. I was looking for a bridge to run into. See, because I was more hopeless at 5 years than I was when I was in that detox center. Because at least when I was in that detox center, I thought maybe Alcoholics Anonymous, maybe somehow it could work for me. But here I was. I hadn't had a drink for 5 years, but I'm going crazy. And apparently I believed it. I loved it. I went to the meeting. It works for you, but somehow it's not touching me. And that's why they say don't leave before your miracle happens. I didn't have an. I was under the illusion, since I'd been to all these meetings and done all this stuff, that I was somehow, I'd experienced what Alcoholics Anonymous had to offer. And it wasn't so at all. My life's been wonderful since then. I've had some days I wouldn't like to experience again along the way, but the fact is that I've been given everything I needed to meet those situations. Not long after that first time through the steps, one of the mistakes I made, I was married to a gal I love very much, and she was is a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, sober a year longer than I am, as a matter of fact. And being who I am, after I had that workshop experience, I came home to our house and told her that I was going to conduct step study school in that house for her. Do not try this at home. I started hearing things like, I watch you at meetings, and everything else. Do you suppose our home could be one of the places you'd practice these principles you've learned? Ooh. Yeah. I listen to you talking to those guys you sponsor, and you tell them things about yourself that I've never heard you say. Do you suppose, what would it take for me to have a, half hour, 45-minute intimate conversation with you? You've never once told me you're afraid of anything. You've never, I didn't have a clue. And so eventually it turns out that I find out we're going to have a divorce at my house. And here I am now, I'm 6, almost 7 years sober. And I all of a sudden, I've been making money again, by the way, but now my luxury car is gone. My bank account is down to $32, and I'm living in the sleeping bag I've got upstairs there. I'm living in that sleeping bag on the floor of a friend's den. But you know what? I wouldn't want to do that again, but I was free in that sleeping bag. I had a relationship with a power greater than myself. And I didn't like my circumstances one bit, and I didn't like the fact that my marriage was coming to an end, and I didn't seem to be able to do anything about it. But the thought of a drink never occurred. I've got guys today that are sober quite a while that was in 92. There was guys that are sober quite a while that, said, you were sponsoring me then, Mike, and I was sure my sponsor was going to get drunk because he'd lost his stuff and ended up living in a sleeping bag. And just watching, although I wasn't conscious, I sure wasn't doing it for anybody's benefit, but they said, watching you walk through that period of time was really important to me. So we're teachers of a sort, whether we know it or not, at all sorts of times. A couple of years ago, late 2002, I got a phone call from a nurse that says, we want to schedule you for a CAT scan. And I said, okay, but why am I going to be having a CAT scan? She says, the doctor hasn't talked to you yet. And so the doctor comes on the line. He says, Mike, I'm sorry you found out this way. Long story short, your biopsy came back, and you've got a very high-grade aggressive form of cancer here, and we need to find out how much it may have spread and what any treatment options might be. And I called our friend Don, and I said, Don, they just told me I have cancer. And Don says, well, cowboy, he says, how does it feel to know that the fact you aren't going to live forever isn't just a theory? You've given me, and we had a laugh, and we could deal with that. It wasn't based on denial and rosy scenarios. I obviously survived that, but I got a chance to surrender all over again. The cancer I had was prostate cancer, and it had spread outside the prostate, and didn't know that immediately. And so I got a chance to make another surrender because I don't know why they seem to schedule surgery at 5 a.m, but that's maybe because I'm just numb then anyway. So resistance. But I'm laying on this gurney, naked as a jaybird, with a sheet over me, and the resident comes around and goes over what they're going to do with this surgery. And okay, he says, it looks like we're probably may have a fair chance of being able to spare your nerves, so you'll be able to continue to function sexually in a normal fashion. Good. And Then another doctor came by and he said, he says, I'm sure you're aware, due to the progression of this, we're not going to be able to save anything. And I said, wait a minute, send the first guy back. And he says, well, you got to understand that I'm his boss. So I'm laying there with a decision to make, and it wasn't really a decision at all because I'd been with you and been held in the power of God, hands and power of God for a long time, and I could just say, thy will be done. Do what you will. And out of that, I get a beautiful experience because although I didn't know it was going to be for a limited time, what I got is I got to essentially my sexual powers were temporarily removed, and I got to find out who I was when I couldn't wave the magic wand. And I don't know about you, but a lot of the guys I talk to, that's a big part of our identity. And who am I without that? And where do I fit into God's plan and scheme of things? Now, as it turned out, what God did for me there, what He's done for me several other times, is I've got a very kind God, and what He does is, because when I'm on the field and busy playing the game, I'm so busy playing the game that I don't see what's going on. So what this loving God does is every now and then He'll take me out of the game and put me in the press box for a while so I can see what's going on. And so what He did around this was He took me out of that game and put me in the press box, and I got to see who I really was. And I got to have that relationship with Him change and deepen. Also got to have a relationship with the woman I love on a different basis. Is she going to stay? Is she going to go? All of this kind of stuff. I got to trust. And she said, when you were laying there in that gurney and you told that doctor, thy will be done, she said, it was one of the most powerful demonstrations of faith that I've ever seen. I wasn't doing it on purpose. It just what happened. But people watch us. So I've had an amazing life because I stayed here long enough for the second miracle to happen and the miracles thereafter. Why don't we take another 10-minute break here, and we'll come back and we'll do one more session and then wrap it up for tonight. Okay. I got 9 o'clock. We'll try 10 after 9. Figured out you guys put me up here so I'd have my back to the fire, and you just kind of turn the temperature up on me here and kind of roast the truth out of me here. It's a glorious thing to watch this group form up, because I know a lot of you know each other, but this group, this way, will only meet one time. And, everybody's relationship is just a little different and will be different because of what's happened here. And one of the things I observed in watching all of you is they're really don't, I'm sure, I hesitate to say this because somebody will just have to prove that I'm wrong, but I haven't seen any lone rangers operating here. Everybody's at least in twos, and the real important thing that happens here is what goes on between you, not necessarily what comes out of my mouth. I'm kind of like the organ grinder's monkey here. I'm just here to get the crowd together. Powerless over alcohol, that my life has become unmanageable. It's important for me to have a current first step. I can't stay sober today. I can't be useful today based on whiskey I drank 20-some years ago. That fades away. That pain goes away. When, the truth is that if I think I'm not powerless today, I'm living in a delusion. And there's a difference. The delusion is what the untrue thought that comes from the inside. It's me fooling me. The illusion is like the magician, where it comes from the outside. It's the magician getting me to look one way while he pulls the rabbit out of the hat over here. And most of the time, what I suffer from is delusion. It's self-induced, lack of ability to see the truth and see the truth of my circumstances. What we really have to offer here. We talk about a program and a course of action and everything else, and those things are all true to some extent. But what we really have here is a way of life. We don't have a qualification course that if you do these things, you'll now, you've satisfied those requirements, I can go live life the way I want to now. That now that I've dealt with the active alcoholism, that I'm not going to find out on a continuous basis that I'm powerless in my life, so unmanageable. So I challenge, it's important as we go along for me to keep an idea of that I need a current first step. I need to know right here where I am with that as of today. Be that as may, let me step back here, and it occurred to me one of the places where I really understood powerlessness was here, and this is just a piece of conduct inventory, and this about my sexual conduct with the love of my life. This is the girl I wanted to marry. This is the girl I wanted to be the mother of my children. This is the girl that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. This is the girl that I gave the ring to. I loved her with all of my heart. Ellen, where was I selfish? I wanted to enjoy sex with her regardless of the consequences. Where was I dishonest? I told her not to worry, that I'd always be there for her, no matter what. I dishonestly refused to consider my ability to keep that promise. Where was I inconsiderate? Well, I gave scant considerations to the consequences of my behavior to her, her family, her faith, her reputation, and her career. I aroused jealousy. I told her that if she didn't have sex with me, that I'd get it elsewhere. That's a charming relationship technique. I paid undue attention to other women in her presence and remarked to her as to how attractive I found them. This is the best I can do in having a relationship. I aroused suspicion. I often spent time alone with other women, and she found me at Holly's apartment. I aroused bitterness. When she became pregnant, I told her that I doubted it was my child. I told her mother that I was too young to get married and didn't want to marry her anyway. When she was in California having our baby, I made drunken calls to harangue and harass her. I abandoned her and our child, and because she was in California and I was back home, I blamed her to all the other people for deserting me. Who did I harm? Well, obviously the baby, Ellen, her family, my family, and our friends. What should I have done instead? Don told me that almost anything else would be a good place to start. Now this is important though, because this is where I find out what I'm really writing here is I'm planting the seed to let God take me to a different place if I'll allow it. God's a gentleman. He won't do it without my permission. I should have treated sex as the sacred gift that it is. I shouldn't have engaged in behavior that I wasn't willing to be responsible for. I should have honestly faced the consequences of my actions. I should have been honest with myself and others. My harms were all rooted in dishonesty, particularly about how afraid I was. Self-reliance will always produce fear and pain. And so now I've got a place where I can go to God and say, I'd like to be a man who could treat sex as a sacred gift in a relationship. I'd like to be a man who can be responsible in this area of his life. You know? I want to honestly face the consequences of my actions. You know? And so forth. That was written long ago, and one of the nice things about that ideal for my future conduct is it gets to change over time as I change. I suggest...
Thank you for listening to Sober Sunrise. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give it a thumbs up as it will help share the message. Until next time, have a great day.